10th BRICS Summit that was held last year in Johannesburg, South Africa, saw the formation of the new Partnership on New Industrial Revolution. This is a program among BRICS nations that was to focus on maximizing the opportunities arising from the new industrial revolution. After that summit, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa told Parliament that the nation had secured loans from fellow BRICS member China in a clean, beneficial agreement for state-owned companies Eskom and Trans-net. Ramaphosa also explained that China was just as concerned about the trade deficit between the two nations and that Chinese President Xi Jinping was willing to look into products that China could buy from South Africa. Well, let's broaden this discussion. I'm joined from Johannesburg by Jonathan Foster Pedley. He's the Dean and Director of Henley Business School, Africa. Jonathan, thank you for joining us here on the link. What would you say was Africa's takeaway from last year's BRICS meeting in South Africa?
Well, it was a great BRICS meeting, Beatrice. It was an interesting one. So we had it in July 2018, and it was a follow-up in the UN meeting in September among the ministers. And it really focused on a number of areas of collaboration, particularly tourism, women's development, multilateralism, security, and health. An establishment of a BRICS vaccine center, for example, the BRICS tourism track. So you can see how the countries are now really starting to bring together a collaborative network around critical areas for all those emerging countries, and that will bring all the economies in closer connection, which is going to allow trade to flow freer, economies to grow a little, and to have a higher degree of trust. So I'd say all in all, it's a very positive development.
So, very positive development, but let's go back briefly to what came out of that summit in South Africa. From the resolutions of the 2018 summit, has there been much tangible progress?
Well, I think it's always very hard to measure progress in these things. You can imagine the complexity, but the willingness is there. And certainly in the September meeting of the ministers, all the ministers expressed enthusiasm and positivity about the way to go on forward. But then you'd say they would do that, wouldn't they? But I think in reality that in spite of the complexity of the agreement, you will see that there is definite progress. India is certainly on track in building that collaboration, and there's a lot of vested interest for the Russian, Brazilian, Chinese, Indian and South African economies to progress this forward. So as in any multilateral and multinational venture, and you only have to look at the EU at the moment, you can see how hard it is to chart and measure progress. This is difficult work. But on balance, I would say we can show some confidence in the way it's gone forward, yes.
So, Jonathan, as this year's summit gets underway, though, what is in it for South Africa?
So I think the biggest thing in it for South Africa coming forward now is this emergence of the Continental Free Trade Area, the African Continental Free Trade Area. This is going to be the largest free trade area in the world, and of course the BRICS are encouraging that because it will give access to the goods and services from all those countries into the whole African continent. So far, all the countries have signed the agreement, but there are still 22 more to ratify it, so it's not quite in motion. But if this African Continental Free Trade Area gets into motion, it means that Chinese suppliers, Chinese companies, Chinese operators, Indian, Russian and Brazilian ones are going to be able to get access to a much broader market. So from South Africa's point of view, that's going to help us a lot. We're one of the largest economies, obviously, in the African continent, along with Nigeria and Egypt. So those three, with good infrastructure, pretty good manufacturing capability, are the ones that will probably see the earliest growth. But overall, it's going to provide avenues for growth so that those countries can come into the African continent, and you will see increasing opportunities. So I think this is a time to continue with the BRICS initiative, to not fall back into despair and cynicism when things get delayed, but to understand this is a piece of work that will take a bit of while, but has massive potential upside.
Jonathan Foster Pedley, Dean and Director of the Henley Business School in South Africa, joining us from Johannesburg. Thank you.